random chance, I just happened to be checking the Japan listings right when 2 special guitars get listed. Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. And while I'm waiting on that other one to arrive, let's review this 2018 Gibson Les Paul. At first, you might be like, oh, I remember those. It's the crazy 2018 High Performance 2 series. It's the time when they started to take away the elements that people didn't like, but still leave some of the newer high performance experimental things. So mainly what we're talking about here is the addition of the Grover tuners rather than the G4 system, because not everybody liked the whole Robo tuner situation. They still went for the wider nut width with the 0 fret nut that we'll talk about later. We've got compound fretboard radiuses with real mother of pearl inlays that also had an asymmetrical neck. You had the carving of the heel for better upper fret access. But the real big standout feature of the 2018 series is no pickup rings at all. How on earth is that possible? Is it like the Les Paul Push Tone from the Guitar of the Month series? Can we pop it out the back, swap anything else in? Not exactly. They just screw it in from the back. It was an experimental thing that was only ever used so far on this particular run of instruments. And it just really cleaned up the look of the guitar because they don't put any type of a plastic pick guard on it either. We've got the fancy electronics. There's even dip switches in here. They had so much going on for them. However, their finishes were a little bit weird. You know, as far as traditional Gibson colors go, because they were all fades. The hues were called Blood Orange Fade, Cobalt Fade, Heritage Cherry Fade, Mojave Fade, which is a very nice one with desert vibes, and then the Hot Pink Fade. We actually documented a early Gibson demo shop one that was slightly modified with the rose gold treatment if you want to look at a regular one of these, reviewed a few years after their release. But if you're curious, what is this whole fade finish? Why do these look so strange? It's because the burst does not continue along the bottom edge. I call them the sideburns guitars because you just don't have the beard portion. So we're not even talking, is it a teardrop burst shape or is it perimeter burst? It's just there's no burst at the bottom. Sometimes that looks good, sometimes it doesn't. One thing we can say for certain is it is not traditional for Gibson to do that. But all those colors had beautifully figured tops. So where does silver come into that? It didn't. This is a prototype for 2018 for the HP2 series. And what's fun is we can verify this in a few different ways, because I was curious, was this a prototype run maybe for 2019? They were thinking, let's do some traditional finishes on top of the crazy bursts. Or was the initial thought, let's do a more traditional color on the second series to bring more people in, but then they decided to go crazy? Looking at our serial number, you have to remember, at this point in time, new guitars were like cars. The 2018 models came out about 3/4 of the way through the prior year. And 2018 was the last full year of the year production number sequence. So we have undeniable, verifiable proof that of the 2018 models, this was the 153rd neck stamped. So that means it was very early within the production. And then I'm not sure whose signature that is. Looks like GGH or CGI. Check in the comments. I'm hoping we will be able to identify that person and then we'll know for sure. But this one is also stamped prototype. I love collecting stamped prototypes like that. It's in the finish. I'm not as big of a fan of the written on prototype because technically anybody could do that, especially on a clear finish like that. Just refinish it, say, oh yeah, it's all original, blah, blah, blah. But that's harder to fake. But I will have to review my old video on these to see what other changes might have occurred. But it could just be, it's a different finish. What do you guys think of silver top? It's rather unique. It makes me wonder, was there a gold? Is this one technically platinum? I really like it. I think they could have sold more like this rather than the crazy finishes, but at the same time, I understand why somebody would want the nice flame top. As far as case candy goes, no pertinent information, but usually that's how the Gibson USAs are. We just have the Japanese version of the owner's manual. I'm sure the torn out section was the warranty card. There's the other side where they show you how not to wind your strings. But then we get the USA version of the owner's manual. This is just my receipt. And then something about the genuine Gibson gear. But the high performance case is really cool. So this is like Gibson's version of a flight case. If I remember correctly, they were like $1,000 to buy these things separately. The problem is if you ever take the protective film off of them, they scratch way too easily, as evidenced by over here. But I love the latches. They're so easy and nice to use. And you never have to worry about this handle breaking because it's made of wood. The only downside is they are ridiculously heavy. Not necessarily easy to move unless maybe you have a roadie. But there were later versions that fix that have wheels on the bottom and then the handle gets moved up there. That's a good version. But it's also around this time when they made a new teardrop shape version that's, similar. In my opinion, it wasn't as protective, but it felt nice. We had documented one of those in the last HP2 review we did. Those were even shorter lived. The big difference was they weren't as heavy and they were going for that whole carbon fiber look. But I would say this is probably the most protective case Gibson has ever created. That was a good first look, but let's go ahead and throw this thing onto the workbench to take a detailed look at its parts and specs to see if there's anything else that makes this one special. Here's what I was able to uncover. By removing the screws in the back, it releases the pickups. Here's what those look like. I guess technically it's a bolt. So it's a bolt-on pickup design. But then they have the spacer on the top. That way you're not over-compressing the wood. So it looks something like this when it's all installed. So that then gets ran all the way through the body. That's what these two holes are for. And then they route specific spots in the guitar's cavity for these springs to set inside. So this is like a normal height adjustment spring. It just lives right here in order to provide the needed resistance against the pickup. So if you're trying to adjust the height of your pickup, you do that from the back. So it might clean up the look, but it makes it, maybe a little bit less convenient to do that. Oh my goodness. Look at that. I didn't see that when I first tore it apart. It's actually called Gibson Rhythm Pro Prototype, and it's dated 5/26/17. Ooh, that's exciting. Do you see what else is different over here? Look at the side of the pickup. They took a notch out of the cover, and then they bent that portion in order to secure it to the pickup. So were they experimenting with not doing any soldering, or was that just a temporary thing that's easy to take the cover on and off for them? So it's still a Birchbucker Rhythm Pro, but there might be some changes. And sure enough, the bridge pickup is similarly constructed, but I noticed something else different. Normally a humbucker route has these little legs. How do they get away with not doing that? They have reversed the legs on the base plate. So normally these stick out the other way, but now they go inward. That's cool. But here we can see it's still constructed with a maple top, and then we get our mahogany body. And then I wish I could make out what that says in the neck pickup cavity, but I cannot read it. It almost looks like it says Ted upside down, and then Rose, maybe Ralph up top. I really don't know. Maybe you guys can see it better than I can. Nearly looks like a leading T or P. I'm pretty sure that's Rose at the bottom. So maybe it was like platinum rose color, because usually this is some sort of a color code or writing. Then it looks like HLPS, maybe 218. Usually that's the model identifier. So somehow that stands for High Performance 2 series. There is a difference between the neck and bridge pickup cavity though. The neck, those springs, they're much thinner. Whereas the bridge has that same thinner spring inside of two of the larger ones, because normally you want that pickup higher, so you need more. Looks like we've got some Christmas trees going on, but that whole notch cutout thing's quite interesting. But next, let's talk about our bridge and tailpiece. The bridge itself is your regular API Nashville style. You can see the branding right here in the center. However, that's not all. You see how floppy and wiggly that is? Similar to what PRS does, this is a version of a locking bridge. You put this over top, so once you have this set up the way you want, this just goes over like so, and it locks it into place. So that's fantastic if you're doing a string change and you don't want any of your personalized setups to be lost during that. However, at the same time, you lose the ability to quickly adjust your bridge on the fly, because that's completely locked into place. You'd have to remove those toppers. And now I believe this is special for the prototype, because I looked at regular runs and I did see some of them had the G-force, some of them didn't. Maybe that was a change. I also saw some of them had the teardrop cases. Some of them also had that top version with the wheels we were talking about. But I did not see another one with this exact tailpiece. So the tailpiece is fine, advanced plating. But like the bridge over here, it has another locking mechanism up here. So without it installed, that's what it looks like. You need that to even hold the tailpiece. So it's another one of those situations where you have to adjust that before you lock it into place. And I believe this is the era when they were using titanium saddles instead of just their standard stuff. But to add to our platinum look, we've got a knurled toggle switch tip. That's fancy. Despite looking like it's made of metal, it is still plastic. But I was reading the spec sheet. This is supposed to be a no noise toggle. I'm imagining that just means there's no popping when you go between the positions. It does feel maybe a little bit more fluid. It has a certain clickiness to it, but we'll look more into that on the backside. As far as the knobs, that's just what these came with. That's why we call them the high performance knobs, as that's where Gibson initially used these UFO styles. Now this version does not have the set screw. It appears to just be a push-on style knob. It works nicely with our silver finish, of which, if you get it in the light just right, you can see some mild finish checking. Like, I don't even think that's going to show up in the camera. But you can also tell it's a two-piece center seam top. Now, as far as how flamey it might be under there, there's no way for me to know. And I don't feel like breaking out the flashlight and shining it against a wall because I'm not seeing anything poke through. So I'm not confident we would find much of anything anyway. But in case I ever sell this, there are some dings in this area. And while this looks like a scratch, I don't really feel it. It could just be something under the finish, but there's some sort of a scratchy looking thing there. And maybe a few other mild imperfections in our finish. But that actually hides really well. I really did not even notice that until we were just at that angle with the light. Well, now that I feel it with my nail and shirt, it is some sort of a scratch in the top, but it looks way worse than it is. But with prototype pickups, we better find out. 8.08 k ohms in the bridge, 764 in the neck, and the middle is 4. And don't forget, we've got fancy electronics. Let's see. Looks like we're currently in the tap mode because Gibson uses a capacitor to do their taps. However, if I flip the dip switch into coil split mode, then you'd get approximately half readings. But we'll talk more about the fanciness on the back when we get to our dip switch board. But just know, all 4 of these come up and down. We also have some minor imperfections on these knobs. But moving on from our weight-relieved mahogany body, likely modern weight relief, the whole V-shape one, we've got that 2-piece maple top with that mahogany neck and a nice bright rosewood fretboard. We had already talked about the compound fretboard radius. All that means is it starts more round in the chording area and then it flattens out towards the top to make soloing and chording just a little bit easier. Traditionally, a Les Paul will have a 12-inch fretboard radius, but this one starts a little bit more round at 10. And the spec sheet said it would go to 16, but I personally measure closer to 14. But keep in mind, those are just feeler gauges. One of these days I need to buy that expensive $250 digital radius gauge, that way I can get even more exact. But they stick with the standard 24 3/4 inch scale. But the nut, it's a 0 fret nut system. So what that means is you have a traditional nut right here, but it has this additional ledge that acts as a 0th fret. That gives you better intonation, I've been told. When they made them out of that brass material, it was actually too soft, and they had to replace them with the titanium ones that I believe this series just came stock with. So that's a feature in and of itself. However, these necks are usually a bit wider, similar to 2015. And wow, definitely 1.75 inches. Typically speaking, your normal Les Paul neck's like about 1.69. Now, sometimes in the 60s, on like certain SGs and whatnot, you can get as low as like 1.6 or so. So, I mean, it's not a lot when you look at it, the measurements, but it feels so different. And some Les Paul necks naturally go to 212 up here, but this one's 214, but there's some that are as skinny as about 2. So there is a little bit of a curve to liking the HP specs. As far as our thicknesses, 0.82 on our prototype. Then up at the 12th, 0.86. That stays devastatingly thin. So you've got all that going for you. Now it's got an asymmetrical neck. So that means on the side where your thumb kind of wraps around, or, depending on your playing style, whatever's going on, They leave a bit more shoulder to the neck here. That way it's more rounded feeling. But then on the treble side, they scoop that shoulder away in order to help you play higher up in the fretting registers. Here's a look at that neck at the 1st fret and the 12th fret. You can really see it here. See how there's so much more shoulder there and then it scoops away? It's still technically present up at the 12th, but it's not as visible. The next thing to know, these frets are cryogenically treated, so they're supposed to be lasting 4 times longer than your average fret wire Gibson was installing. That said, I don't believe that was just specific for the HP series. I think I remember reading that branding for other Gibsons at the time. But look closely. HPs do not have a fret nib, so if you're one of those guys that likes your whole fret and no plastic over the ends for all your bending and vibrato needs, you've got that on this guitar. So a lot going on there. And that's before we even talk. Most Les Pauls do not have the mother of pearl inlays for their trapezoids. The HP series was one of the first ones to introduce that as a mainstay within their series. It's part of the reason why the Les Paul Modern today, Gibson's current take on the HP series, still retains that feature. But then we jump up to the headstock, and they've done away with pretty much anything crazy up here. It's just our regular Gibson mother of pearl logo, Les Paul model silkscreen. It's not a fancy multi-rod truss system, it's just your 2-way. But they do give you a metal, I believe aluminum HP truss ride cover. It's pretty cool. This one has some dings and wear along the edge. So far, the top's not too bad. I'm assuming this was played by someone, not necessarily just a collection piece over in Japan. If you guys are always curious why I'm pulling prototypes out of Japan, that's Gibson's dumping grounds for research and development and prototypes, because the Japanese market just eats that stuff up. But now the USA market's really interested in that kind of stuff too, but I think Gibson just didn't want them to surface. It always felt like they tried to be hush-hush in that era. But now, jumping over to the backside. Here you can see what I was talking about, how they install those pickups. That's what it looks like without the washer or bolt installed. Here's what it looks like with just the spacer in it. It was certainly an interesting idea, but ultimately Les Paul guys are all about tradition, so not having the pickup rings, it has a certain modern look to it. I just don't know if that's fitting for the highest end model. I got a good chuckle. I was looking on Reverb. Someone actually installed pickup rings on one of these. So I suppose that's an option for someone out there who loves everything else about this but can't get along with that. After trying to reinstall those pickups, I also see another reason why they might have not done that. It's just as complicated. You might as well leave it alone. I'll have to finish fixing that bridge pickup here in a minute. But let's talk about this. So, like many modern Gibsons of the time, it uses a printed circuit board. Then you get the CTS pots on there. Then this is what we're talking about for dip switches. It's these little white sliders. Now normally on our backplate here, which has built-in shielding, that's why it has this texture. That's also true for your toggle switch plate. That was a Henry J era type thing. But there would be a sticker that told you what all these fancy things did. But essentially, you can choose between split and tap, which, as I was talking earlier, tap kind of gives you more of a P90 tone. They use a capacitor in order for that to occur, whereas split just takes half the coil out. But then you can also choose in and out of phase. There's a high-pass filter, which I'm going to try to get that right this time. Apparently, you need to roll down your knob after activating that in order to use it. Then we also have a transient suppression, which I believe is just supposed to clean up your tone a little bit if you have some interference. If you're asking me, split typically sounds better with dirty tones. Taps tend to sound better, to my ear anyway, for the clean tones. It's not super convenient to get in here, so usually you'll toy around with it when you first buy it and then you'll set it and forget it. But your pickups are then on a quick connect system, so any white connector pickup would fit in here. And then our no noise toggle switch is also a PCB that has a white connect system. But now on the back, there's some really nasty gouges. Like, how does that even happen in normal playwear? I can understand some belt buckle wear and button draw marks, but this looks like somebody took some keys to it. Then we've got some dings along the edge, scratches. There's even some stand rash in certain areas. You can see where it was turning yellow. So someone enjoyed playing this thing, or it was beaten up during the prototyping stages. You never know. Those, while we're on the topic, I do notice a small finish check up here in our cutaway. When it comes to metallic finishes, I'm kind of surprised that there's not more than there already is. But check that out. Thin binding in the cutaway, so that's the maple top exposed. But I really like the comfort cut here on the heel. It's not exactly like the Access Les Paul, but it's not the regular style that we have today on the Les Paul Modern, because they actually shaved this all away. So it's very close to what the Access Customs get, and in my opinion, better than what they offer today. And if you look, this one also has a belly cut. It's rather shallow though. Reminds me a lot of the LP Artist model of the 70s. And after comparing photos, that is something unique to this prototype. This has a much more shallow belly carve. Here's what they ended up with. They went a little bit more deep. It's possible this might even be just a little bit more shallow. Sometimes it's hard to compare that just by a photo though, because depending on your angle, it looks so different. But as far as belly cuts go, that's pretty shallow. Well, let's grab some dimensions. The body, right at the edge, no cuts. It's 2.03 inches. The deepest part of the cut to the very edge of the binding is 1.57, and that gradually goes to about 1.9 in your belly cut area. Then measured directly in the center of the guitar, you're at 2.05 inches, so everything's the same as per usual as far as the dimensions of the body outside of our new cuts. And just for verification purposes, 9 1/4, 13, and then about 17 1/4. But I'm digging the natural back with that metallic top, very reminiscent of a gold top. I wonder if they were going to do goldies like that, because if you look, this was another reason I decided to take a chance on this one. It looked like it had a beautifully figured mahogany neck, and I suppose technically it does, but I wouldn't call it like super ultra flame, but it does dance a little bit in the light. It's just a nice moving mahogany, but there's definitely some impressions on the neck. Couple of light dings right there. But even as a picky collector myself, I don't think this is damaged enough where, you know, guys wouldn't necessarily like it anymore. When it comes to prototypes, you kind of just have to roll with the punches. There's a lot of interesting dark mineral streaks on this thing. But there's that cool prototype stamp and written prototype. Usually when they write it on, that happens, you know, well after the stamping. So this actually started life a prototype, because that has to occur before they do the finish at the same time as the neck being stamped. Now, when you get the written on prototypes, that can sometimes be like an after the fact thing. Like they just took the neck off the line and then it eventually became a prototype, or they decide to brand it that as such later on. That's why I enjoy collecting actual stamped ones, because there was another one in the shop that had this, but it didn't have this. So it's like, you know, despite that being a really cool model, I think I'm gonna pass. We had actually documented a different 2018 Les Paul prototype with the Apex head carve, if you'd like to check that one out next. Here we can see the 2018 model stamp again, as well as our serial number, dating it as the 153rd production number guitar of the 2018 serials. And this one doesn't look like it has any evidence of having the G-force system on it, and they are locking Grover tuners. All said and done, once you get all the screws and back plates installed, it should be around 8 pounds 11 ounces. But let's go ahead, finish that up, and then I'll see you guys on the playing segment. First impressions on our tone? Like your average Les Paul. It's not like particularly beefy sounding. In fact, the neck is quite bright. Modern sounding is what I would say, which is perfect for what they were going for here. But let's talk about this noiseless switch. So, no hands on the guitar. I mean, as far as the circuit's concerned, it's pretty much silent. And there's still a difference between the tones, so you'll hear that a bit. But there is a visual difference. The neck position isn't as far up as normal. It's actually a very subtle movement in between the three as compared to your regular toggle switch. So that would be something to get used to. Because sometimes I find myself looking down, it's like, am I really in the neck position? But sure enough, I am. But now let's do the HP4 circuit correctly, hopefully this time. Right now, everything is in the down position, so that means we are currently in taps. So normal, tapped. It's subtle but different. But now I've got the two switches flipped up, so we switched into splitting. I just had an idea. Since you can technically blend them in the middle, what if we tap and split at the same time? So regular. And now together. So that's a tapped bridge with a split neck. That's rather interesting because you get the best of both of them. The more brittle attack of a split with the warmness of the tap. I've now reversed them. So it should be tapping the neck and splitting the bridge. Sounds good to me. So regular middle position. Now I've got the high pass filter on. This is the one I've never demonstrated properly. I just thought you turned it on and that was your high pass filter. No, it's actually combined into your volume knobs. So here it is, everything on 10 as usual. So it still acts as a volume, but it also rolls off some of those highs. Then you can also mix that with your tone knob. I think I would have liked it better had that just been a whole sweep here and you no longer have a volume control or it takes over your tone position. I think that'd be more useful. Because had other viewers not told me, hey, you're demoing that wrong, I don't think I would have ever noticed that that's what that was even doing. And that was an A-B between transient suppression on and off. We'll have to see if that does anything more with some dirty tones. But before we get there, you can't forget about your tone knobs. So this one actually reverses what coil that they're using. I believe that would be mainly useful in the splitting position. And this is your out of phase. So out of phase will be middle position only. You go from this to this. Now we can go from not sure I really hear a huge difference on that. So I either don't have a discerning enough of an ear or I'm still doing something wrong. There's so many tones in here. But with dirty, we'll start with our coil split. even when it's not out of phase, it kind of has that similar quack to it when you tap a humbucker. But now hear it in split mode. Full humbucker again. In my opinion anyways, I think split sounds better for dirty. I will try the neck position. I'll try that low pass filter again. So if you're asking me, the best part about the dip switch is you can choose between tap and split, so it will go to your preferences, whether you share my thoughts or not. Maybe you like the neck split, the bridge tapped. You got the option. Well, you can also remember, you don't have to use any of that. You can just play it like a regular Les Paul. It just sounds like the modern era Les Pauls. There's not a lot of vintageness to it. So there we go, a unique 2018 Gibson USA prototype Les Paul. What are my final thoughts on this? You know, we got a lot to talk about here. Let's talk about color first, though. When I first saw this, I was like, oh, that's interesting, custom color. But I've got to say, I think they missed an opportunity here, because I guess if you think about it, the Les Paul Moderns, they're like, you know what? I think people would like the solid color metallic finish, and maybe this helped them get that idea when the new ownership came into play. But I really like this platinum top, especially mixed with that nice natural back and sides. It allows you to appreciate the wood as well as the modernity of this one. But now let's talk about, how does it feel to play? Is the 1.75-inch nut width really that crazy? I can see how a lot of people, like, if you're really good at guitar, you're probably going to be like, ew, no, this isn't what I'm used to. But if you're not as sensitive to that, and you can go between like 50s and 60s necks, I mean, I have to demo everything because that's my job here. I didn't find this overly fatiguing by any means. It's definitely on the thinner side of things, and the wide neck profile, I mean, it's not exactly like a classical, but it's similar to that territory. If you like to anchor your thumb on the back, you might actually really like the HP specs. And as far as having pickup rings or not, do I think it affects anything? Not really, because I always anchor my hand right here, not necessarily on a ring, but some guys might even find it more comfortable. But if you anchor right here and you're used to having that ring where your finger can be against, you know, maybe then. I mean, it's a divisive model. You're either going to love it or hate it, but I hope this episode helps you make an informed decision on whether one of these 2018 HP guitars is right for you. If you're curious about the fate of this one, I think I'm just going to hold it back in my collection. I think it's a cool piece of Gibson history. But if you really have to have it, you can always message me and we can talk about what the price would be. All right, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed, and we'll catch you guys tomorrow on the next one. Take care.